Hello everyone and welcome back to Retro Legends. There was a moment in the mid-90s when Apple looked at the console world and thought, we can do this better. Not just a simple foray, but a real attempt to redefine what home entertainment could be. The internet was emerging, CD-ROMs promised multimedia worlds, and the idea of a machine capable of combining gaming, education, and communication seemed truly irresistible. That dream was called Apple Pippin. Today, it is remembered as one of the company's biggest failures. But behind this machine, there is a surprising story, made of immense ambitions, counter-current choices, and a vision too far ahead, or perhaps too confused, for its time. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more journeys into the world of retro gaming. Let's start. To truly understand why the Pippin was born, one must look at Apple in the early 90s as a company searching for itself. It was a period marked by continuous changes in leadership, conflicting strategic visions, and a fragmented, often redundant product range. Apple no longer had a clear direction. Each division pushed different ideas, in an attempt to find the next big step that could relaunch the brand. In this climate, the Macintosh remained a technically valid and respected product, but it was also synonymous with high prices and a niche audience, composed mainly of professionals, creatives, and educational environments. It was not a machine designed for the living room, nor for quick and immediate consumption. Meanwhile, the home entertainment market was undergoing a radical transformation. Sega and Nintendo had shown that consoles could be mass-market items, desirable, capable of entering millions of homes with a simple and direct language. Video games were no longer a technological niche, but a cultural phenomenon. Sony was also on the horizon, ready to bring a more adult, multimedia, and lifestyle-oriented approach to the sector. At the same time, the CD-ROM was perceived as the key to the future. More space, more content, more narrative and interactive possibilities. Apple watched all of this with a mixture of interest and unease. The company feared being excluded from the consumer market, of becoming irrelevant to a new generation growing up in front of the TV and not in front of a desk. From this came the idea of a gateway to the Apple world, a machine cheaper than a Macintosh, designed for the living room, easy to use, capable of handling games, multimedia, and, at least in intention, also the nascent online experience. Pippin was meant to be this, a hybrid device, halfway between a computer and a console, that broke traditional categories. Not a work PC, but not a closed and specialized console either. It was Apple's attempt to reinvent itself as a consumer company, even before truly understanding what the public expected from it. The name Pippin originated as a mere project label, not as a brand intended for the public. Apple often used names of Apple varieties to identify internal initiatives that were still fluid, and Pippin perfectly fit this logic. An embryonic idea, not yet defined in its boundaries, conceived to evolve or even be abandoned without leaving commercial traces. This very detail reveals much about the project's nature. It wasn't conceived as a new Apple console to sit alongside the Macintosh, but as something much more abstract. The true ambition was to build an open platform. Apple would provide the technological heart, an architecture based on PowerPC, a streamlined version of the operating system, and the necessary specifications to ensure compatibility. Everything else, design, components, final price, distribution, would be entrusted to third-party manufacturers. In essence, Apple didn't want to sell a machine, but a standard, hoping to replicate in the living room a model similar to that of the PC world, where multiple companies produce hardware compatible with a single software platform. It was an extremely bold vision for the time, especially for a company known for total control over the user experience. With Pippin, Apple agreed to relinquish dominance over hardware in exchange for a wider and faster spread of its multimedia ecosystem. A conceptual reversal, not to impose a finished product, but to plant a seed, letting others give it shape. Precisely this choice, so distant from Apple's traditional DNA, makes Pippin one of the most atypical and revealing projects in its history. The idea behind Pippin was as ambitious as it was difficult to communicate. It wasn't meant to be just a console to connect to the TV for gaming, nor a traditional computer disguised as a home device. Pippin was born with the goal of being everything simultaneously: a gaming machine, a multimedia center, an internet terminal, a CD-ROM player, and even an educational platform. A single device designed for the living room, capable of uniting entertainment, information, and learning. In theory, it was an extremely advanced vision. Pippin could run video games, play multimedia content, browse online via an external modem, read interactive CDs, and host educational software. Apple imagined families using the same machine for their children to play games, consult digital encyclopedias, explore the nascent web, and consume audio-visual content. It was a concept that anticipated the idea of a smart, convergent device by years, much closer to what we consider normal today than to the technological landscape of 1995. The problem was that this vision clashed with the public's expectations of the time. Consoles were supposed to be immediate. You turned them on, inserted a cartridge or disc, and played. Pippin, on the other hand, spoke of expandability, optional peripherals, keyboards, modems, software updates. Concepts familiar to Mac users, but alien to those looking for a simple, direct living room experience. It wasn't immediate enough to be a console, nor powerful and flexible enough to replace a computer. In this sense, Pippin seemed to arrive from the future, but without finding a present willing to embrace it. The market hadn't yet developed the need for a hybrid device, and the infrastructure, home internet, widespread digital content, online services, was too immature to support that promise. And at the same time, Apple itself wasn't entirely ready to support a project so distant from its historical identity. Pippin thus found itself trapped between what it wanted to be and what the public was willing to understand. A good idea, but at the wrong time. From a technical standpoint, Pippin was a creature profoundly different from the consoles it was meant to compete with. Apple decided to build it from within its own world, adopting a true Macintosh architecture. At its heart was a PowerPC CPU, the same family of processors used in Macs of that era, coupled with an operating system derived directly from Mac OS. CD-ROM support was native and advanced, and the graphics management, on paper, appeared superior to that of many mid-90s consoles, especially in terms of resolution and color depth. This choice gave Pippin an aura of a powerful and sophisticated machine, but it also introduced a series of difficult compromises to ignore. The hardware was expensive to produce, both for the components themselves and for the licenses tied to the Apple ecosystem. Furthermore, the absence of a dedicated GPU, like those found in consoles designed exclusively for gaming, forced the CPU to handle many graphical operations. The result was a system that, to achieve performance comparable to its competitors, had to work harder, consume more resources, and rely on less efficient software solutions. Even from a development perspective, Pippin proved to be a problematic platform. Programming on an environment derived from Mac OS meant dealing with a system designed for productivity, not for real-time gaming. Developers had to adapt tools and mindsets, and this made it slower and more expensive to create optimized games. Traditional consoles offered simpler, more direct, and developer-friendly hardware, while Pippin demanded hybrid skills and a greater investment. In the end, Pippin found itself in an uncomfortable no-man's land. Too complex and expensive to be an accessible console, too limited and inflexible to be a true computer. It was a hybrid machine that promised a lot, but couldn't truly excel in any specific area. And in a market that rewarded clarity and identity, this technical ambiguity became one of its biggest limitations. The relationship between Apple and Bandai is one of the key elements to understanding the fate of the Pippin. Apple, true to its idea of a licensed platform, did not want to produce the hardware directly. It was looking for a partner with experience in the consumer market, capable of bringing the project into homes and, above all, making it appealing to a young audience. Bandai seemed like the ideal candidate, a Japanese giant with a long history in toys, video games, and entertainment licenses. It was Bandai that took the biggest risk, creating and distributing the most famous model, the Bandai Pippin Atmark. The launch initially took place in Japan, a market traditionally receptive to technological innovation, before attempting expansion into the United States. On paper, the operation made sense. Apple provided the technology and the operating system. Bandai handled production, marketing, and distribution. In practice, however, difficulties emerged almost immediately. Bandai found itself grappling with extremely high production costs. The hardware, based on the PowerPC architecture, the CD-ROM drive, and components derived from the Macintosh world, made the machine expensive to assemble, drastically reducing profit margins. Unlike traditional consoles, often sold at a loss to recoup costs through software, Pippin lacked a sufficiently broad catalog to support this model. Every unit sold was an economic risk. Further complicating the situation was an identity crisis. Bandai had to promote a product that didn't fit into any clear category. It wasn't a pure console because it offered keyboards, modems, and multimedia applications. It wasn't a computer because it lacked the flexibility and power of a true Macintosh. It wasn't even a simple multimedia player because it required a higher technical involvement than the average public was willing to accept. Every communication attempt ended up confusing rather than clarifying. Marketing never managed to answer a fundamental question: what is Pippin? A console? A computer? An educational system? A gateway to the internet? Bandai tried to emphasize all these aspects simultaneously, but the result was a fragmented and ineffective message. The public didn't understand why they should choose Pippin instead of a PlayStation, nor why they should prefer it over a real computer. In the end, Bandai was left with an expensive product that was difficult to explain and was launched into a market that was rapidly polarizing. On one side, consoles, increasingly powerful and accessible. On the other, computers, increasingly comprehensive. Pippin remained in the middle, without a defined position. And Bandai, despite its initial confidence, found itself bearing the weight of an ambitious vision that the market was not ready to embrace. To give you a concrete comparison, in 1995, a PlayStation cost around $299 at launch in the United States. The Sega Saturn, although initially starting at a higher price, quickly settled around $399. Even the Nintendo 64, which would arrive shortly after, was priced at $199, aiming for an aggressive price-performance ratio. In other words, for the cost of a single Pippin, you could buy a PlayStation and several games, or a competing console complete with accessories. This disparity wasn't just numerical, it was conceptual. Sony and Sega had adopted a clear strategy: dedicated hardware sold at low margins, compensated by software sales. Apple, on the other hand, applied a logic more akin to the computer market, maintaining a high price on hardware without a gaming ecosystem capable of sustaining that choice. The result was an immediate perception of disproportion. Pippin cost as much as an inexpensive computer, but offered neither the flexibility of a Macintosh nor the gaming power of a console. The problem worsened when considering the catalog. At launch, PlayStation could already boast titles like Ridge Racer, Tekken, and Wipeout, while Saturn offered high-profile arcade conversions. Pippin, on the other hand, arrived with few games, often closer to multimedia or educational experiences than true system sellers. Additional features such as internet access or expandability through peripherals were presented as added value but required additional expenses: modem, keyboard, dedicated accessories. The real cost of the Pippin experience kept increasing. From the perspective of the average consumer, the comparison was merciless. Spending almost $700 for a machine without killer applications, in a period when the industry was democratizing CD-ROM gaming, seemed a difficult choice to justify. Pippin wasn't just more expensive, it appeared out of scale compared to market expectations. In the end, the price itself became the symbol of the project's failure. Not because the technology was without value, but because the public never managed to understand what they were actually paying for. In a sector where PlayStation, Saturn, and Nintendo 64 offered immediate entertainment at half the price, Pippin ended up embodying the idea of a machine too expensive to be a console and too limited to be a computer. An awkward position from which it never managed to escape. In the video game market, there's an unwritten but absolute rule: hardware only matters up to a certain point. It's the games that determine the success or failure of a platform. Pippin broke this rule, not by choice, but due to a lack of alternatives. At launch, it simply didn't have a gaming offering that could justify its existence as a console. The available catalog was meager and profoundly unbalanced. Most titles fell into the educational or multimedia category: interactive encyclopedias, educational software, CD-ROMs designed for learning or for an almost museum-like use of the medium. There were also interactive experiments, products difficult to classify, closer to technological demonstrations than actual games. For an audience accustomed to platformers, fighting games, racing games, and shooters, Pippin seemed to offer little to nothing familiar. Traditional games were very few, and in most cases, technically modest or derived from minor projects. What was completely missing at the time, and made all the difference: a killer app, a title capable of defining the machine's identity and driving public purchases. No recognizable franchise, no iconic character, no exclusive capable of competing with names like Mario, Sonic, or Sony's new productions. Without a face and without an iconic experience, Pippin remained anonymous. From a developer's perspective, the situation was equally discouraging. Programming on Pippin meant grappling with a complex architecture, derived from the Macintosh world and poorly optimized for gaming. Development tools weren't intuitive, performance wasn't always predictable, and the final result required more time and resources compared to competing consoles. Added to all this was an even more serious problem. The installed base was almost non-existent. Investing in Pippin made no economic sense. This sparked a vicious cycle. Few games meant few hardware sales. Few hardware sales meant zero interest from developers. Without developers, the catalog couldn't grow. In an industry accelerating towards increasingly ambitious and spectacular productions, Pippin remained stagnant, lacking the fundamental fuel that powers every console. Games capable of creating desire, belonging, and identity. One of Pippin's most unique aspects was its ability to boot directly from a CD, without the need for a permanently installed operating system. A choice that reflected Apple's idea of creating an immediate platform, almost plug-and-play, halfway between a computer and a console, but which at the same time highlighted its limitations in terms of structure and identity. During the development phase, several controller prototypes also circulated, some of which never reached final production. These were experiments that sought to define a control language suitable for an ecosystem still searching for a clear direction, but which ended up remaining confined to the laboratories. The same fate befell numerous official accessories, announced or designed, but never distributed. Keyboards, multimedia peripherals, and expansion components were supposed to strengthen Pippin's hybrid soul, but the machine's short commercial life decreed their abandonment before they could even see the light of day. Even on the software front, there were obvious contrasts. Some titles showed surprising technical solutions for the time, especially considering the basic hardware, but many remained incomplete or unfinished. More than actual finished products, they seemed like demonstrations of what the platform could have become in a more stable context. Today, it is precisely this combination of ambition, incompleteness, and commercial failure that has transformed the Pippin into a cult object. The scarcity of units produced and its unique position in the history of video games and computing make it one of the rarest and most sought-after consoles on the collector's market, often associated with very high prices. The Pippin never achieved true commercial widespread distribution on a global scale. When it was launched in the mid-90s, it had to contend with giants like PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Sega Saturn, and its presence in various markets was very limited. Apple and Bandai produced about 100,000 units, but only sold about 42,000 worldwide, of which about 30,000 in Japan and 12,000 in the United States. In Europe, the console had an even more restricted distribution, with only a few thousand units produced for business use rather than for the mass market. This scarcity of hardware was also reflected in the software library. The platform supported a small number of titles, much fewer than other consoles of the era, and many games never really took off. Some titles like Super Marathon, Racing Days, Power Rangers, Zeo or Mr. Potato Head Saves Veggie Valley remained curiosities rather than commercial successes, thus creating a vicious cycle. Few sales meant little interest from developers, and few exclusives made the console even less attractive to gamers. This combination of low sales and limited software is one of the main reasons why the Pippin is remembered today more as a collector's item and historical curiosity than as a successful platform. One of the most curious things about Pippin is how Apple almost erased its existence. No celebrations, no re-releases, no official mention in the following years. With Steve Jobs' return and the company's rebirth, Pippin became a chapter to forget. A failed experiment, a symbol of an Apple without direction. Today, Pippin is no longer seen merely as a mistake. It was a failed experiment, but incredibly consistent with Apple's philosophy, to anticipate the future, even if it meant making mistakes. Many of Pippin's ideas, closed ecosystems, multimedia, home internet, became a reality. Just 20 years later. Apple Pippin did not change the market. It did not leave a direct legacy, but it tells us something fundamental. Even the most visionary companies can fail when timing, price, and audience are not aligned. It is the story of a console that did not want to be a console, and perhaps for this very reason, it was destined to fail. And with this, our journey into the past comes to an end. How many of these curiosities did you already know? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell for more journeys into the world of retro gaming. Thank you for watching Retro Legends, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay retro, stay legends.